Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. Find me over on Twitter at TVC_Calvin or on the Dynasty After Dark Rumble or YouTube pages. Thank you guys for tuning in. And if you caught my episode yesterday, I gave you the 3 riskiest top 12 startup ADP quarterbacks in 2022 and beyond. And today we're going to continue on that with the running backs I think you need to pump the brakes on so that you're not caught holding the bag like this car is driving off the cliff with these running backs. Before we jump into them, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the video. I think the likes and the comments are the most important. Honestly, I don't really know. Please tell this podcast to your friends as well. I'd really like to get the podcast out there, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. Now, the running backs here that I want to touch on are very interesting guys. So these are all guys that are going as the top 12 in current startup ADP over on Dynasty League Football for the month of May. So as of right now, things could have changed and shifted a little bit in the startup drafts, but the ADP has not caught up to those changes potentially. But yeah, I think that these guys are some guys that we really need to be a little bit cautious about headed into the 2022 season and beyond. So the first guy here I'm going to touch on is Saquon Barkley with the New York Giants. And Saquon Barkley, he is 25 years old. He has an ADP of RB6 overall right now in Dynasty, and that is very, very high for someone like Barkley. Now, I understand it. So we're going to touch on the positives of Saquon Barkley first. Saquon Barkley has had quite a few unlucky injuries over the last couple of years. He was probably one of the best prospects coming into the NFL for a long time. In a long time, he was just a generational talent at running back before Jonathan Taylor. And I think that he's a very well-rounded athlete, just pure athlete. He's very well-rounded. He's very good, very explosive on the ground, at least until last year. And then in the passing game, he was always a massive threat there as well. So there's a lot to like about Saquon Barkley, but the negatives are where this really brings down the optimism for him, especially away from top 6 dynasty running backs right now. You can make the argument that he should be top 12, but yeah, I'm a little bit cautious about that myself. So in 2018, he was the number 2 overall pick to the New York Giants. He played 16 games that year, finished as the PPR RB1 that year as a rookie. It was just disgusting what he was able to do as a rookie. In 2019, in his second year, he played 13 games, suffered a high ankle sprain at the end of the year, so he missed the last 3 games of the season. He finished as RB10 that year. 2020, he only played 2 games. He tore his ACL that year, and then last year he played 13, but it just wasn't that good. The Giants were kind of a nightmare as a whole last year. So it wasn't just Barkley, but if you hear about it, he was also still recovering from the ACL tear. He wasn't fully back to his pre-injury form at that point. So there's a lot to be nervous about. He hasn't played a full 16-game season since his rookie season. And I get it, running backs don't tend to play full seasons, but when you look at it, there's a lot of injury risk with Saquon Barkley. You know, the fact that he wasn't able to come off the ACL tear and be his predominant self just right away, considering how routine those are becoming, is a little bit of a red flag in my book, because a lot of these guys can do it and come right back. Some of them, it does take a little bit of extra time, but I don't trust it, and I don't know if he trusts it himself just yet. Secondly, you have a new coaching staff over here in New York. You got Brian Daboll coming over from the Buffalo Bills. And if you look at his scheme that he did in Buffalo, they did not utilize the running back position very much at all. Especially around the goal line. They definitely used the wide receivers and Josh Allen a lot more over there. And when you look at Daniel Jones, he's not Josh Allen. I'm not saying that whatsoever, but he is mobile and he has an athletic side to his game, and he could definitely steal quite a few of the touchdowns on the goal line if they scheme up the plays like that. And then they do have a deep wide receiver core. People aren't very high on it right now, but yeah, there's a lot of new here with this team. Now, after this year, Saquon Barkley is going to be a free agent. I really doubt they franchise tag him next year. And if he goes, I don't know if they're going to give him a workhorse back ever again. So you're paying top 6 numbers for a guy that might never, ever see top 10 again in his career just because of the volume aspect. So it's really hard to justify RB6 right now for Saquon Barkley. And that's why I'm a little out on him personally. Now, I think myself that he's going to bounce back and he's going to return to his pre-form, but use this argument in your trade talks for Saquon Barkley. Try and get him on the cheap. That's my opinion. I think that he's going to probably finish as a top 10 RB, maybe right in that fringe. But again, for Dynasty football, especially with the running backs that are coming next year, you're overpaying quite a bit for Saquon, what I think he can do this season. And after this season, I'm not convinced that Saquon Barkley is going to give you routine top 10 performances again. Now, the second guy that I want to touch on is the newbie, the rookie, Breece Hall, RB number 7 off the board. He's 21 years old. And Breece Hall is interesting, right? He had one of the most dominant combines since Jonathan Taylor. Like, he was just very, very explosive. He has very good production over at Iowa State, where he is coming out of college from. And yeah, Breece Hall is someone that there's a lot to love for him specifically. But when you look at him, first off, he's a rookie. We haven't seen him do anything in the NFL. David Montgomery was from Iowa State too. He didn't get top 7 Dynasty RB numbers when he was drafted by the Chicago Bears, which was a great landing spot at the time, right? So why are we just crowning Breece Hall based on combine numbers? This is what I never understand about the combine. People look at it so heavily. Like, I get it. He had a good combine, good production. The team, look at what the team has told us this entire offseason. They have Michael Carter, who they've already said they like and they're going to continue to use as a third down role, right? Okay, they drafted Garrett Wilson, number 10 overall. They have Corey Davis. They drafted Elijah Moore in the second round last year. They have Denzel Mims, who's, whatever you think about him, has been making a name for himself at camp so far this offseason. They brought in CJ Uzama. They brought in Tyler Kroft at the tight end. Both of those guys are very proficient pass catchers. So they added pass catchers all over the field, right? Breece Hall is a competent pass catcher, and that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that he can't do it, but he is going to get such a small percentage of the target share in this offense that to justify top 10 in a PPR league or even a half-point PPR league, that's where it gets a little bit more justifiable. But all the leagues I play in are full points, so that's kind of why I'm taking this stance. RB7 in a full PPR league is just kind of crazy. Is he going to have a lot of work on the ground? Yes. Is he going to have a lot of work through the air? No. Is he going to have a lot of touchdowns? I don't know. I really don't know. Until we kind of see that, it's kind of hard to predict that. Touchdowns are not a sticky stat whatsoever. So it's just very hard for me to give an unproven guy in a very competitive offense just in terms of playmakers. There's a lot of them there. There are so many playmakers there on this team now. How are we giving him top 10 over guys like Alvin Kamara, who, Alvin Kamara isn't even top 10. Cam Akers, I know people are still out on him. Antonio Gibson, these other guys, I get the risk about those guys as well, but they're a little bit more proven, in my opinion, than Breece Hall. So I think we might be crowning the rookie just a little bit too much right now. Now, the third guy I want to touch on is Derrick Henry, and this is not a young guy. This is a very old guy who is currently going as RB11 in the ADP in startup drafts. Derrick Henry, he actually played, he came back. He missed quite a few games last year, 9 games last year. And he had a Lisfranc injury to his foot. rushed back after the injury and was able to play in the playoffs. Didn't really do that well. I don't think he was fully healthy for the playoff game that they played, but Derrick Henry is going on age 29, I believe he'll be in season, towards the end of the season. And I get what Derrick Henry is. He is so good. He is very, very good. He is King Henry for sure. But the fact that he is someone who, in my opinion, shot up like a shooting star and is now just kind of crashed into the ground like a comet, because I don't think he can sustain this ADP. We saw what happened last year when Derrick Henry went down. They lost Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown. The Titans still got the number 1 overall seed, but the games were very, very gritty, weren't very, they were tough grind out games for the Tennessee Titans. In my opinion, they're going to realize they cannot lose Derrick Henry like that. So there is no way they're going to continue to give him over the last couple years, right? So last year through 8 games, he had 219 attempts on the ground. He had 378 in 2020 and 303 in 2019. That is a lot of carries. That is an astronomical number of carries. He had 219 through 8 games. You double that, and he was on pace for a full 17 games. He was on pace for almost 500 carries. That's just a crazy number of carries for one running back in the NFL. So I really think that they're going to try and pull back that number of carries for Derrick Henry to keep him a little bit more fresh, because the biggest thing with Derrick Henry is he's a grinder, man. He gets better the longer that the season goes on because he's such a physical freak and such a physical athlete. So if the numbers come down, right, from just a carry perspective, that's already a major red flag for Derrick Henry. He needs that volume to be very competitive from a fantasy football standpoint. And then you take into account the fact that he is older, right? He's 28. I get it. He kind of started a little bit later. He's also a physical freak. He's just a massive human being. So maybe his body's holding up a little bit better than some of these other guys. And he does keep really, really good care of himself too. I'm not saying that either. But eventually these guys all start to fall off a cliff. They all do at some point in time. So is Derrick Henry going to start to slow down a little bit? It might be this year. It very well could be. You couple that with the lack of volume that I'm kind of expecting for this team. And then you throw in the fact that injury risk, the Lisfranc injury was a massive foot injury. There's guys that have that surgery and they come back and they're just never the same. It constantly bugs them for the rest of their career. Julian Edelman was a perfect example, right? He had that Lisfranc injury later on in his career, and he just never really felt 100% right with that foot until he retired, right? He was always kind of, if you look at it like I did, because I was a massive Patriots fan, right? If you look at his reports that he came out with on how he was feeling in those years following the Lisfranc injury, he always kind of just mentioned it and talked about it a little bit. So I think that the Lisfranc injury on a running back specifically who needs all that power, like Derrick Henry, could be a long-term risk for him. And then you take into account, we've gotten very lucky with Derrick Henry over the last few years that he's dodged an injury bullet. And again, some guys do. It's not really predictive who's going to get injured. But the fact that last year he missed 9 games. In 2020, he played 16 games, 2019, 15 games, 16, 15. So he's only missed 2 games his entire career before this. Eventually, again, those injuries do kind of catch up to guys. So it's going to happen eventually. RB11, again, with the guys that are coming next year, this is 2022. Maybe he's really good again. It's entirely possible. He's such a big, freaky athlete that he could buck the trend of, he's well past the RB cliff in terms of age. He could start to fall off, but maybe he bucks that, like an Adrian Peterson, right? But the guys that are coming next year, the running backs that are coming there, you got more guys coming each and every year. Cam Akers, again, is a guy that's outside the top 12 right now. Kamara. There's guys that I think could definitely push Derrick Henry. And from a fantasy perspective, he really needs that volume to be an elite level fantasy asset. So I have, again, all 3 of these guys, I'm just making a contrarian case on why you should be cautious with them going into 2022 and beyond. You can think that this is completely wrong, and I get it. I understand how this is not the most popular take right there, but I am just laying out a case on why you should be a little bit more nervous. So if you like this content, I'm going to be coming out tomorrow with another one for the wide receivers, my top 3 wide receivers in the top 12 that you should be cautious about. And wide receivers are where it gets a little bit more fun because there's a lot of youth there. But again, we've seen so many wide receivers just continuously produce every single year. So thank you guys for listening. Please be sure to follow me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. Like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And I appreciate you guys. Have a good night.